The All Progressives Congress, APC, have finally begun the presidential screening of aspirants who are seeking to succeed President Muhammadu Buhari. After initial delays, the ruling party commenced the screening on Monday, the 30th of May, 2022. More than 20 party faithfuls comprising serving members of the president's cabinet, governors, lawmakers, and business leaders, among others, picked the APC presidential nomination and expression of interest forms sold at 100 million naira. While some presidential hopefuls paid for the forms themselves, in some cases, various interest groups purchased the nomination tickets for their preferred aspirants, a move that was rejected by some of the beneficiaries. Joining us on the show this morning as we take a critical look at the APC presidential primaries and aspirants on the platform is Professor Anthony Kila. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Professor Kila, good to see you too.
Well, good morning.
Very quickly, let me ask you, what's your reading of the political landscape? The primaries process, what happened at the PDP, the trends that we have observed, and all of that, before we then narrow it down to specific subjects.
Yes. Well, I think, this is the season. We've seen a lot of drama in the PDP primaries, and I bet we're going to see more drama in the APC primaries. PDP put on a good show in terms of theatrics, aesthetics, and the persona on stage. That would make a good thing for a playwright, a lot of things. But I guess the one coming up will even be a richer script to watch and to reflect on. The summary you gave, which Chunde gave, it says a lot about the ups and downs of the expected primaries. It says a lot about the drama, high cost of nomination form, people refusing their forms, so many people coming from what ought to be one team. Overall, I think in my reading, what we're looking at with the APC seems to be the kind of battle for legacy in a polygamous family, where every mother thinks the child has a right to it, or every child thinks they can have a right to the father's legacy. There is an aggravating factor here that whilst the insiders, quote unquote, the children are fighting to succeed for this legacy, the aggravating factor is there's an outsider, call it PDP and other parties, that can actually take over the whole thing from them. So I think at some point, just like the PDP thought to themselves, at some point, some people is going to call everybody together and say, who is the real enemy or competitor? So let's be careful not to lose everything whilst we're trying to gain something inside.
Well, thank you, Professor Kila. I read a recent article of yours that you styled as a letter to delegates. PDP's delegates have had their turn, but it's not too late for APC delegates to heed some of your advice here. And one of the things that you wrote is that when they're looking to choose an aspirant, they should be saying, this person is the one that can best represent my people on behalf of whom I am here today. I'd like you to expand on that, rather than this person is the one who has the most thousands of dollars to hand over to me right now.
Well, yes, you see, the whole point is we have a bizarre system that makes us lose sense of words and the crux of many things we do, of notions. In reality, delegates from delegatio, delegated, should be representing the people of their constituency, to go there to say, these are our interests, these are our sensibilities. In the name of my people, I cast my vote for Mr. A or Mrs. B because I think this person embodies what we believe, because I think this person can achieve what we hope for. To do that, the delegates have to have that sense. And, we should know the delegates. We have citizens on whose they're acting. It is also true that many people don't realize how important this delegate affair is, because these delegates, unlike the rest of millions of Nigerians, they are the only ones that have a chance to decide who comes to fore. So in reality, the rest of us, come February 2023, will be choosing between pre-cooked dishes. Whereas these people now in June 2022, May, June 2022, they have a chance to choose between raw food. They get to decide if we're having rice or beans. Later on, we're just going to be choosing if it's jollof or fried rice. And that is a key responsibility. So ideally, delegates in a very basic form, their duty is to choose somebody that can win, and that winner should be somebody that represents the yearnings of most of the citizens. That is what they ought to be looking for. And, that is their duty to the country, to themselves. I'll advise delegates to vote somebody they can talk to later on, not somebody who will become unavailable or not accessible to them. But, we say all these things almost for the record. This is like a philosopher or cleric talking, knowing that people are sinners. They'll go back after Friday or Sunday to their sins. But you have the duty to say it every day. And perhaps one day somebody will earn it. The system we run is so strange that we know things have been monetized, which is a crime, which is a sin, I dare say. And we just get on with it as if nothing has happened. It's so worrisome, I don't even want to talk about it. I like to pretend it's not there.
But you can't pretend because it's there staring at you in the face. The question is, how much money do you want as a delegate? 20, 30,000, 40,000? I'm sure the EFCC isn't even seeing that. That's the case. But there's always a solution. And, we make this equivalence between Nigeria and American democracy. So let me make that mistake, and I use the word deliberately, make that mistake again by saying, yes, let me make that mistake of making the equivalence by going to America. It was the case in America many years ago. In fact, they were called spoils men that enjoyed the spoils of power.
Yes.
They got every position possible until Rutherford Hayes, elected president then, brought in by the spoils men, said enough. Who is going to be that Rutherford Hayes in Nigeria?
Well, first of all, let me confirm, trust you to spoil people's fun, Rufai, to make people, you take away the illusions every time. That's your signature. If we refuse to pretend, who is going to change that system? We need a group of people who are going to have the vision, the clarity of mind, and the courage of voice, and the capacity of action to at some point get together to say, look, we cannot continue this way. In the meantime, actually, there's one step to take before going forward. If we're talking about monetization of our politics, this is one space in which one can clearly agree with Chinua Achebe when he says the only problem of Nigeria is leadership. Because in reality, much as these aspirants seem, they're not that much. What is it, 20 people? We have a huge problem when we realize in this country, 20 people who want to be president of Nigeria cannot sit around the table and say, gentlemen or ladies and gentlemen, let us decide not to bribe. Let us decide not to buy. Because you see, this is a buyer's market at this point. In reality, we go back to economics. It is not the delegate forcing them. They are the one offering to corrupt the system. And it tells you that we're planting tomatoes and expecting corn to come out of it, because we have a group of people, less than 25 of them, who cannot say, let us all agree that come the day of convention and days before, we shall not share money, and let the true winner win. And this tells you that whilst we're battling with the problem of millions of Nigerians not paying tax, crossing the road, begging and bribing, that is a lot to handle. But if a few people cannot agree on a basic thing that is good and fair and leads to a productive governance system, if a few people cannot agree that, then you see where our problem starts from. So, if common sense cannot prevail, then you need a reform or revolution. Revolution in the sense that you need a new thinker who can view a world that is devoid of shortcuts, malpractices, and that can enforce it. It must be said in 2015, a lot of people in their good hearts saw somebody like the then general, now President Muhammadu Buhari, like a steelman, an enlightened dictator that can say, stop, let us change this. It has not happened. This is not the time to blame anybody. We simply look at facts. But to Rufai's point and desire, the future will have to be that somebody who can say, or a group of people who can say, look, let us try differently. After all, what we want is the good of Nigeria, and perhaps make fame and fortune for ourselves, especially fame. To do that, if we really want to get it right, we have to get the best person to come up. And the fact that the winner is neither the most persuasive or the most brilliant or the most capable, but it seems to be the one that can spend more, tells us we're in trouble, from the start. It tells us the foundation has a problem. So the way forward, as you said, is, we have some game changers have to come up. People who from day one have to decide that we cannot continue this way. Therefore, what do? We need to put in place a system that does not allow it to happen. First of all, we need to share the ethics to say buying and bribing is wrong, which is a very basic thing, but here we are.
Well, Professor Kila, I'd like you to comment on just 3 specific things. One, Governor Wike,
yes,
runner-up at the PDP presidential convention, is pointing accusing fingers at southern governors or party leaders, accusing them of treachery, betrayal. 2, the presidential candidate of the PDP, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, has been going from house to house to visit the co-contestants who lost out and he won. And 3rd, what do you think is likely to happen with the APC convention? Is the APC also likely to look towards the north to pick its candidate? And if we have, in the 2 major political parties, 2 northerners running the race, how would that play out? Or we have a northerner in the PDP and a southerner in the APC, how would that still play out?
Well, I start from Governor Wike's outpour. That's a case of Wike versus Wike. Governor Wike is pointing fingers at Southerners that betrayed him, but he's not thanking Northerners that voted him. Because if some Southerners betrayed him, the votes he had were not just from Southerners. So that means some people abandoned his mentality of voting for ourselves. I.e., if everybody voted for themselves, he would not have that number of votes he had. So instead of accusing those who betrayed him, maybe he should spend a paragraph in his press release or speech to thank those who voted for him from the north. And if he has to thank those who voted him from the north, that means those from the south are not betrayers. You see, the language of conspiracy and betrayal is alien to democracy. We just don't know it. We think it's a normal thing. Partisan politics is about interest, regardless of where we come from, how we pray or how we love. It's about saying that I align with this person because he speaks like me, he says what I want, and I'm going to go with that person. That is what it ought to be. But, here we are. For the second part, but that's a Wike style. For the second part, Vice President Atiku, former Vice President Atiku, is going about, I think that's, the right thing, you go and meet co-contestants, because what you want to do is to get everybody together under one big tent. The feeling politicians have is that if they can get everybody that matters in the party together, it gives them a strong chance to start from. So first you gather your own, then you go and garner a few more vote outside. I think that is the trajectory they're looking at. For the APC, everything is possible. I think in reality, I don't want to offend anybody, but the fact is that out of the close to 20 people that have shown their interest, some will be screened out, a few, I guess. Some might not make it to the screening. My friend Rochas Okorocha is dealing with other issues at the moment directly. But I think amongst all, you really have to know that you have a lot of few contenders and a lot of pretenders. The fact that you have a few contenders and a lot of pretenders amongst them tells you that at some point, the pretenders will stop to pretend and only the contenders will be on stage. And it shows you that somebody or a very few people have the votes of a lot of those pretending to contend. All these pretenders, contenders, people changing their roles leads to tell you that there would be some sort of consensus. There are 2 possible consensus. There's a major consensus in which everybody agrees on 1 or 2 people, or a minor consensus in which some people fold their campaign and then queue behind somebody. To the question of, is it going to be North or North versus South? Whilst that topic is very popular in the country, I, Anthony Kila, find it very pedestrian, that is what we limit our conversation to. But it's a reality, even, being hungry unnecessarily is pedestrian, but here we are, we have to eat. That is the reality. I do not think that the conversation they should be having in APC, should we do North versus North or North versus South? Because APC is a government in power, one. So incumbency matter. Incumbency can dictate the narrative and leaders can direct. Two, because those vying for position of office, especially from the South, are big wigs that you can't just say hush to. You can't just say to them, oh, look, they've brought a Northerner, so do not contend. I think of 3 or 4 people, from the South, who you cannot make that kind of persuasion very easily to. They matter because without them, you're going to lose. If the APC decides to zone to the North in the name of that is the way to win, they're going to cut out a big chunk of the Southern vote. And of course, the Southern wing of the party cannot win alone. So I think the way forward, and politicians know their interests. This is why I laugh when citizens follow politicians blindly, and rather than remaining citizens, they become followers and supporters. Politicians know how to manage their interests. At some point, they're going to sit down at a round table, maybe not a very round table, because political table tends to have head, and you know who's first and who's second amongst the rank. But they're going to sit down round table and look at it and say, what is the path to victory without hurting some people so much that they might break the whole table? So I think somewhere in the inner chambers of discussion, it's not going to be North and South. It's going to be who can win. Because in reality, and this is something delicate that must be said, it is wrong to assume that, for example, Wike was edged out mainly because he's a Southerner. I suspect it was mainly because he did not represent some kind of interest on people. And I think the same thing is going to happen in the APC.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Anthony Kila, for your insights and for joining us on The Morning Show.